Welcome to PM Express Business Edition. Things are not all that good for the economy when it comes to our finances because of our rising debt, not so good revenue mobilization. Well, that is what rating agency Fitch is making us all understand about the economy. But what should it have taken, or should it have taken Fitch to signal all these troubling times ahead of us in terms of the true states of our economy? Well, we'll be looking at managing the economy amid Fitch ratings downgrade. I'll be engaging Mike Kobler, his CEO and co-founder of Synergy Global Holdings, and he's also an investment analyst as well. Professor Roberto says an economist and associate professor at ISE and dean of the graduate school of the University of Ghana. And these are my guests in trying to get some deeper understanding on the economy, Fitch rating, and how that affects you out there if you're a businessman, and the larger economy. But before we talk about the economy and Fitch rating, let's talk about the recent explosion of Bogoso and what that means for the mining industry and whether this could have been avoided. Tony Obeng is the president of the African Mining Network, an NGO, and also the former chief executive of the Ghana Chamber of Mines. And Mr. Obeng, thank you so much for joining us as we extend our condolence to all those lives that have been lost in Bogoso in the western region about this explosion. Tony, first, let me get from you, what do you make of the situation based on reports and what the police are saying about this explosion in Bogoso in the western region? Tony, if you can hear me, you can unmute yourself and trying to get from me about your concerns. So what do you make of this explosion that has happened in Bogoso in the western region? I think we are having some challenges connecting with Tony Obeng. He is the former chief executive of the Ghana Chamber of Mines and also the CEO of a non-governmental organization, the African Mining Network, and trying to get his thoughts about what has happened, whether it could have been avoided, and what will be the impact of this on the mining community, as well as in terms of whether there should be any insurance and all those things. But in the studio with me is Mike Kobler, his chief executive of co-founder of Synergy Ghana and Global Holdings as well. And he also, when it comes to investments, and that is Playground. And also on Zoom, I'll be connecting with Professor Robert Osei. He is an economist, a professor at ISE, and also the dean of the graduate school. But let's still get back to the development in Bogoso in the western region. And Mr. Obeng, so we've lost him and we'll be getting back to him quickly on that one. But Mr. Mike, I mean, how are you doing yourself? It's been an interesting time.
Yes, very well. We're just keeping up. Yeah, it's
an interesting one. And just to quickly get your thought on this incident that has happened, I mean, I know that when it comes to your industry where you raise funding for some of these companies as well, could you see investors also reacting when it comes to some of these things? First, to find out whether the required safety this thing was followed and all the rest. And from what is happening on the ground, we could have dozens of lives being lost as a result of a truck sending dynamite to the mining firm for some explosion to be done.
Yeah, I mean, and let me express my condolences first to the bereaved families who have been affected. I mean, these are very difficult times, as it were. Obviously, investors get concerned. I mean, there are various transactions currently, people trying to raise money for various mining industries or sectors. And one would then begin to look at the kind of insurance packages that people move in terms of transit thing of these explosives and all that, what kind of mechanisms that people put in place. Obviously, insurance companies are going to be hardly hit because if these things are insured, it means that they'll have to pay out some money for compensation and all that. So it has a direct impact on the economy or the industry per se. These things happen anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not something that is just peculiar to Ghana. But the question is whether we are putting the right insurances in place, whether the right safety measures were put in place before the movement of the trucks, in terms of monitoring and all that. So people will just fall back and assess what kind of mechanisms we have in place to be able to make an informed decision whether it's a risky area to invest or not. Yeah.
But if I get you, in circumstances like this, there's supposed to be an insurance, so victims can fall on these insurance.
Exactly. I mean, anytime that goods move around, I mean, goods in transit, as it were, and these are not ordinary goods, these are explosives. I mean, so obviously, you expect a certain premium that will be charged by insurance companies. But then when this also happens, it means that the payout from insurance companies will also be high because families have to be compensated. I mean, the trucks involved and all that. I mean, even trying to replace those explosives itself is quite expensive. So depending on what kind of measures that we have put in place prior to that, because these are goods in transit, as it were. So these have to be put in place before you can then determine whether it was the right things were done, and if it was done, what are the implications, I mean, going forward. Yeah, so
I'll be coming back to you on our main topic in terms of Fitch ratings, downgrade, and the larger economy. But let me get to Mr. Tony Obeng. He's the former chief executive of the Ghana Chamber of Mines. He also managed a mining firm before, and also he's currently the chief executive of the African Mining Network. I hope I got the name right. It's a non-governmental organization. Mr. Obeng, this has been an industry that you've played a lot. You have risen from the ground to the top. First, let me seek your thoughts on what do you make of this accident that has happened in Piate near Bogosu in the western region. Can you unmute your button because we are struggling to hear you?
Yes, thank you and good evening to your viewers. I think what happened today in Bogosu, I mean, Piate to be precise, is quite a side incident. And interestingly, I find myself close to the place. I mean, about 45-minute drive away from the incident area. That is where I come from also. So it's very sad for all of us here.
I think
a student colleague said it does happen from time to time. So, but in Ghana, this has not been something that has been happening quite regularly. So this incident is very terrible, and my heart goes for the community and those who have lost their loved ones.
Mr. Obeng, what is the best practice when it comes to, is it carting or transporting these explosives to the mining areas or the fields?
No, you know, the carrying explosives is an activity that is very strictly monitored, and it actually requires some specific approach to undertake. First of all, packaging is very important. You need to ensure that the products you're going to carry are very well packaged, so that there will be no, exposition, and so you can be sure that there are no leakages and can travel without a problem. Again, when you're loading, there's also a requirement for one to be extremely careful in the way materials are loaded onto the vehicles. And on the way, ideally, there should be a lead vehicle that indicates that the product that is being carried is volatile, is an explosive. So one has to be very careful. So usually, in a very ideal situation, there's a requirement for one to have a lead vehicle, usually a smaller pickup that leads the main vehicle that is carrying the explosive, just to indicate to those people around that the vehicle behind is carrying something which is very volatile. So I don't know. Normally, the industry is very strict with that, as far as I know. They are very strict. Before you move a vehicle out move an explosive vehicle out, you definitely have to ensure that the use requirements are met before you move. It has to be checked on.
So, but what I stand to be educated and corrected, but it looks like the events you're picking on the ground, it doesn't appear there was a lead vehicle. But let's look at one critical thing here. Do you think that what has happened calls for strict enforcement or review of the laws when it comes to handling these things in areas where it's endemic or where communities are around?
Well, seriously, I have not gone to see it. I've watched some videos that have been posted and news that have been coming from the radio stations and all that. But there must be serious care once you are transporting these materials. People living along the road must be careful themselves, but they should not always be mindful. They should not always be thinking that you are carrying explosive, because they are not there because, or they will not stop what they do regularly because you will bring your explosive to pass. I mean, that is the reason why you need a lead vehicle to indicate dangers that might be around, when we look at the environment and ensure that it passes safely because of its volatility. So it's unfortunate it didn't happen. I know, and I say this, you know, in the deep knowledge of the way they've done it in the past, that they have been very careful in transporting these explosives. I don't know exactly what happened, why this occurred, and why it occurred where it did occur. It is something that needs to be investigated, and if there were some shortcomings, they must be, those who are involved must be brought to book. I mean, if it were just an accident, it would be terrible, but it may have been an accident just like that, which was not intended. But if it was out of negligence, or, you know, out of some dreadful negligence, there must be some action taken.
Mr. Tony Obin, before I let you go, in circumstances like these, what happens to issues about compensation? Is it the mining company in question, or the company that has been contracted, or what happens? Because it appears that most of the mining firms are outsourcing most of their services. Okay, it appears we are struggling with our internet.
You know, yes. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Go ahead quickly, sir.
Okay. Look, I think the issue of compensation is quite key in situations like this. You are required to have, you know, a full insurance about over your carriage of this material. Yeah, these are goods in transit, and you must ensure that you have you know, total insurance cover. However, for those who have lost their loved ones, it is really not the insurance that they require. You know, the insurance will not bring back the people who have died. I saw some two young boys on the street who were the lifeless bodies of these two young. You can bring them back. So yes, there should be the payment of compensation, but I think the families must be met, the community must be met, their feelings must be assuaged. There must be a way of trying to tone down their feelings. They are really devastated, and I think that is the most important thing, that to somehow find a way of consoling them, and then obviously you have to compensate them. And there's a requirement. You cannot carry these explosives without insuring them, in the sense of ensuring that people who get affected, unfortunately, would not do so for free.
Mr. Tony Obin is president of the African Institute for Extractive Industries and former chief executive of the Ghana Chamber of Mines, and that has been his playground in terms of working with several mining firms and expressing his views and thoughts on this accident in Bogoso. And again, we express our condolence and prayers and hearts to all those who've lost their lives and those who are recovering at the hospitals in the Western region. And we close the chapter on this, and let's talk about the economy. So, I mean, Mike Kobler is an investment analyst. He's the chief executive of Synergy Global Holdings, and also Professor Robert Osei is the dean of graduate school. He's an economist and professor at ISE, joining us via Zoom. So, Mike, let me first get your thoughts as an investment person. When you heard about, or when you read about this downgrade thing, and for you, was it coming, or you were shocked, or, well, it was expected?
Well, I would say it was expected the way we were going in terms of our borrowing rate and all that. But having said that, you know, rating agencies have information available to them. All the information that we send out there to the IMF, to the World Bank, is accessible to these people, and they also have their own independent sources of gathering information. So information is key, I mean, in terms of how they determine the ratings. Obviously, if the ratings go well, the investment committee is happy, government is happy, everybody is happy. But when you get a lower grade, as it were, you get into what we call the junk bond status.
And the B status is more of highly speculative.
Exactly.
That they are warning investors that there's a probability that the country or company Ghana may struggle to pay its debt on time. Okay.
That is not a very good sign. It's not a very good sign because then investors are very worried, especially when you have alternative investments. And the reason why this has become necessary is the fact that everybody knows that the US Fed has said that they're going to increase rates. Okay, so now you're going to compete with the likes of America, who are offering better rates for their instruments. And then, so if somebody has to make a decision whether to buy your bonds or to put it in the US Fed, the person would say yes, because for your downgrade, they will look at the US Fed. Or if they have to give you money, they'll have to charge you more as a compensation.
But Mike, let me get this understanding. I mean, we were told in school and investment class and all those things that investors or offshore investors or those outside the country are long-termish. They are not looking at what is happening now to take a decision. I mean, Ghana has never defaulted on its debts before. I stand to be educated or corrected. So, I mean, let's just understand what happens in this investment space for those who buy our bonds, that some of them even have more information than we do. Should it take a Fitch downgrade for them to react negatively, or what?
No, it's a context. It's the overall context of things.
For best place to place capital.
Exactly, and you are competing. The world out there, it's very competitive. So, and money is fungible, okay? So, and money doesn't like noise, okay? So now, if you have alternative investments across, you have a portfolio, you have to take a decision where you want to put your money. Okay, so yes, you're right. Investors look for the long term, but we also have short-term instruments, we have long-term instruments. Okay, so at the end of the day, the investor is looking at the choices that they have. Now, if a rating agency comes and says that they are not very sure about your ability to pay, or your ability to pay in the future is in doubt because your debt stock is growing, it kind of shows a red flag. And worse still is the fact that even Basel III has said that
those are requirements in banking or regulations
in banking, yeah, okay. So if you are below investment grade, the moment you advance a loan to a below investment grade company or a country, you have to make a provision. You have to begin to make a provision.
That means you are required. You're supposed to be in a certain grade.
Exactly.
If you fall below that grade, you're supposed to compensate any investor that tries to buy your bond.
Exactly. And for the banks to have a tidy book, they anticipate that there's a probability that you might not be able to pay. It's okay. So then immediately, the day you grant the loan, you start making a provision. Which is not very good for international
Mike, let me bring in Professor Robert Osei. He is an economist, Dean of Graduate School, and also Associate Professor at Institute of Statistical, Social, and Economic Research. Prof, and for you as an economist, I mean, you also look at a bigger picture. Were you worried about the verdict of Fitch, or we know what is happening in the economy? Do we need Fitch to downgrade us before we sit up or take action?
Thank you very much, George, and good evening to your good self and my brother who is in the studio. And let me also begin by sending my condolences to all those who have been affected by this very tragic event. Do we need Fitch to tell us or remind us that we actually are not heading in the right direction? Probably not. But sometimes it's also good to get a third view of how you are doing in terms of your economy, and also whether indeed it reflects in the choices that investors have to make with respect to Ghana relative to other parts of the world where they can actually put their monies. Okay, so yes, and again, like Mike rightly pointed out, the key has been on the debt sustainability issues, and the fact that fiscal space has been really constrained. And what it actually then also tells you is that our willingness, we may be willing to pay, but our capacity to pay will be actually dwindling. And therefore, if you do not have the fiscal space, clearly you may be willing to pay, but it just becomes a bit more difficult. So I think this is the signal that Fitch has sent to us through the downgrading of our ratings.
In terms of managing the economic space, what should government be doing now? And yesterday's press conference, the finance minister spoke about the fact that they are going to look at reviewing the ceiling for expenditure, quarterly expenditure, reviewing it downwards by 20% as well.
Yeah.
What should government be doing now in terms of the concrete measures and not the talk, the mere talk, to send signals to those people out there, the Franklin Templetons, those banks out there that are buying our bond, to tell them, to convince them that, listen, the company Ghana means business. And I should be convinced by what its CEO and board chairman or shareholders are saying.
No, so I guess that the signal that has been sent in the press conference by the minister is very positive, because, George, we need to understand that part of what Fitch has actually signaled to us is the fact that they are not comfortable with the pace at which we are actually growing our debt. Now, how do you grow your debt? You grow your debt because you are borrowing. Why do you borrow? You borrow because you have large fiscal deficits. Okay? Now, if you have a situation where you are actually spending 60+% of your expenditure just on compensation and then on debt repayments, essentially you have very limited fiscal space within which to operate. And therefore, it also could signal that you could compromise on your growth going forward. Okay, and if you compromise on your growth going forward, that hurts your revenue, and then that comes back again to actually bite you in terms of your fiscal position, which you started with. So, yes, of course, the reduction of expenditures by 20% is critical. I mean, what it does is that our projected expenditure, which for 2022 of about 135 billion or so, is being brought down to close to 100 billion, which will match our revenue projections. But note that our revenue projections are also being driven by levy. Okay, and already there is some contention with respect to the levy in Parliament. So again, for the investors sitting out there, they are looking at all these different parameters and making a judgment, because of course the ratings are not just quantitative. Okay, there are qualitative components of it as well. So they make a judgment as to whether, given all the parameters that we know in respect of the economy, whether we are actually heading in the right direction. So the signal that we are giving in respect of cutting the expenditures is important, because what you are signaling is that while we still intend to work on our revenue side of things, we still believe that the gap between our revenues and our expenditures are high, and therefore we need to work on that to bring it down.
Prof, I'll be coming back to you on the question about revenue and whether that is the answer to our problems. But Mike will be going for a short break very soon. But I just want to take quick thoughts about, what do investors that are buying our bonds, or the investors in Ghana, want? I mean, you've been on road trips, Eurobond road shows. I've been on before. And these guys out there even know more about the economy than we do, Mike. What do they want?
They want the certainty that they'll be paid.
That is
very simple. Yeah, it's not rocket science. I mean, if I'm giving you money, what's the assurance that I'll get my money back?
So you're raising revenue.
Yeah, you're raising money, your revenue, but your revenue is not enough.
Because if you look at the returns that a Ghana bond or anybody who is investing in Ghana in terms of our bonds is getting, you won't get that investing in London, you won't get that investing in Germany, you won't get that investing in Europe, even though you are assured of your funds.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, the guys who run Ponzi schemes, okay? I mean, when they start the Ponzi schemes, people are paid.
Yeah.
Okay, and people are happy. All right? But is it sustainable? No. So, yes, so obviously, I mean, once you are paying good rates, yeah, it's an attraction for people to to patronize your bonds. But there's something called sustainability. How long will that continue? And that is what the ratings point to, saying that, hey, be cautious, okay? This is becoming more like a speculative investment. And yeah, so Robert was right. I mean, the first thing to do is to cut your coat according to your size. So the finance minister's 20% cut, it's a step in the right direction. That's the fantastic move. I mean, to assure investors that, okay, you've realized that there's a problem. So without even though Parliament has approved the entire budget, you are cutting it by 20%. 20% is very significant. Okay, now, beyond the 20%, what are you going to do to fix your revenue? What other measures are you going to put in place to make sure that you are cutting your coat according to your size?
As an investor, and I'll be going for a break very soon, are you also worried about the current posturing in Parliament that there's no absolute majority, and therefore, in terms of revenue and getting some assurance, a problem there? Because I remember that the Economic Intelligence Unit warned before this last year that is a challenge that investors should take note that there's no absolute majority in Parliament. Pushing some fiscal policies through Parliament might be a big challenge. Sitting at the back and watching as an investor, is that a big concern for us as well?
Yes and no. I mean, it's good to have healthy debates. It's good. Democracy only thrives when continually, I mean, we find ourselves getting to a position where we need to negotiate. Okay, and so the place that we are today is to get the two sides to talk and to engage each other.
Yes, they are not doing that.
Well, it will come. I mean, obviously, George, that's democracy.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen overnight. I mean, it's not America today because it started overnight. No, it's gone through 100 years of economic dialogue. I mean, frustrations, they fought in their parliament just like we're doing and all that before they got to where they are. We'll get there. We'll get to a point where, governance is such that the country must run. Okay, so one way or the other, the politicians have a way of, there are things that we all know that when it comes to parliament, the parliamentarians and then they get it going. We'll get there. I mean, I'm not worried at all. I think that is just a process. We have to go through that painful process of learning how to deal democratically and how to negotiate these terms with each other.
Mike, I'll be coming back to you to also get your thoughts about those things that should be done to convince investors out there to get that confidence back into the economy.
Sure.
And also, Professor Robert Osei is an economist. I'll be getting his thoughts on whether this whole thing about our current challenge is revenue, or other things as well. This is PM Express Business Edition as we look at managing the economy amidst a downgrade of our credit worthiness by Fitch. What should be done? And what about businesses out there, the impact on them and the larger economy? Take a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome to PM Express Business Edition as we talk about the downgrade of Ghana's credit worthiness and how should we manage the economy to restore investor confidence, and looking at the impact of what has happened on businesses and the larger economy. That is Professor Robert Osei is an economist, is Dean of Graduate School and Associate Professor at the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research. And also Mike Kobler is CEO and co-founder of Synergy Ghana, and also an investment analyst and person when it comes to getting all the best investment advice. Maybe he might be the best person to go to understanding the markets and where to place your fund. So, Prof. Robert Osei, before we went for the break, I was trying to get your thoughts also about the things that government should be doing right now. What do you think? And also, for you as an economist, is it all about revenue? Because now we've been made to understand that, no, revenue, or something else that we need to do to turn things around quickly.
Thank you very much, George. No, so I think the point I was alluding to essentially was that clearly what government needs to do is what government is doing.
Okay.
Two key things.
You think government is on track in terms of what they are doing now?
Well, they have started doing or taking the corrective measures in response to this downgrading.
Okay.
Two key things need to happen. One has to do with the expenditure, reducing the expenditure And of course, the second has to do with looking again at our revenues to see how we can actually improve the general revenue effort. Remember that those 20% cuts that the finance minister has announced will mean that we need to do two sub-things in respect of our expenditures. One is that we need to cut the fat in terms of what we spend our monies on. Okay? There seem to be, well, potentially, there could be some fat around our expenditures. And of course, it is why there is always this talk about corruption and the need to reduce corruption. But the second has to do with a reprioritization of our expenditures. Okay, to relook, take a step back, relook at the things we are spending our monies on, and ask whether we are getting the highest dividends in terms of returns for what we are spending our monies on. So that is important, and that will happen with this policy measure that the minister has announced. But of course, you cannot also forget the revenue side of things. And so, whether e-levy or not, we need to improve our revenue efforts, okay? More often than not. And note that what the e-levy signaled to investors was that we were going to address the deficit problem or the fiscal problem and therefore the debt problem by actually getting more revenue. Investors said, no, we are not convinced that is the only way to go about it. So now the minister is saying, okay, we have heard your concerns and we are also going to take a bold step in respect of expenditures. And I think that is the right approach to dealing with this.
But Prof, for you, do you think that this analogy, not from you, but elsewhere, about the fact that if you raise more revenue today, our problems are over. So today, Ghana rates 200 billion Ghana cedis as revenue. Can we all go and sleep?
No, absolutely not. So the issue has always been about fiscal space. The issue hasn't been about revenue. It is cutting your coat according to your cloth, right? Now, of course, if you continuously, and I've said this over and over again, if you continuously, year on year, overspend on your revenue, irrespective of how many times you get debt relief, you will go back to the debt distressed positions. Okay, so clearly it is about looking at your fiscal space and thinking creatively about how to manage that fiscal space so that it doesn't overburden the economy through your debt position.
I'll come back to you on the way forward. Let me bring in my cobbler in terms of, let's look at businesses. And there's always this saying about, you can never get a better sovereign than your government and all the rest. I mean, and I don't want to mention names, there are certain corporate institutions here, even government agencies that have had very clean books and all the rest. For businesses out there, what should they be doing right now to minimize the shocks of this on them raising funds outside, bilateral transactions and all the rest?
Well, unfortunately, businesses do not have too much leeway. You are right. I mean, once your country is downgraded, it's an automatic. Yeah, but that's how the world works. I mean, the first thing people look at, where is this deal coming from? That's the first thing. It's from this country. What's their rating? Okay, before they then begin to dive in to see what the fundamentals are. Okay, so what businesses can do, and you are right. I mean, there are businesses in this country that are able to get lower interest rates better than what
government, better rating than government.
Obviously, not the rating, but in terms of rates.
Yeah.
Okay, and what they do is basically they look at the receivables that they are getting. Probably they have some export receivables, or their clients are blue chip clients who have a better rating. So then they use the receivables as a benchmark to attract cheaper funds. Okay, I mean, that's the only way that business can go around it. But once you are not able to demonstrate to financiers or investors that your income is not intrinsically linked to anything that is government related, or you have a dedicated flow which is independent of the economy per se, then you are in trouble. Then it means that you are subject to the ratings that the government basically has. Otherwise, I mean, the way out is to use what we call securitized structures. Okay, so you are looking at income. So, for instance,
can you break that down?
Cocoa Board.
Yeah,
so, for instance, Cocoa Board. Okay, so Cocoa Board borrows LIBOR plus 1 or LIBOR plus 2. Okay, government is borrowing LIBOR plus 7, LIBOR plus 6. Why? Because Cocoa Board's receivables, when they sell the cocoa outside, they sell to the likes of Baricadi, they sell to what do we call it, Cadbury. So those companies that they sell to, okay, are AAA companies. Okay, so technically, the revenue they are getting, the income that they are getting, is not linked to anything within the economy. Okay, so then they are able to get away with a better rating.
Okay.
And VRA has done the same. VRA has borrowed outside using specific mining receivables. Okay, what do we call it? Income that they receive from mining companies which are multinationals. Okay, so those receivables are blue.
So it's about convincing those investors out there that you are not tightly linked in terms of your income to government service.
Exactly.
And that you can pay on time. You can pay on time,
exactly. And you can also ring fence those revenues. I mean, have structures where you are paying, the income that you are receiving from those blue chip are directly ring fenced to repay your obligations. That is the only way businesses can get around this situation. Otherwise, anywhere you take your books, anywhere you take your business plan, everybody is looking at what is the country's rating.
And it's very fundamental. For them. And for the banks who might be taking cheaper credit outside, there's an implication there as well.
Precisely.
For on lending to local
businesses. Exactly. Because once your cost of funds goes high as a result of the downgrade, you also have to pass it on to your customers.
Mike, I'll be asking you two critical things as well. And you are an investment person. You play in this space. You advise people to go out and raise money. What would be your advice to government in these times? There is rumors about government doing another Eurobond this year. Now, let's watch the space. The U.S. Federal Reserve might be hiking their rates this year. That could compel investors to place their funds in U.S. bonds because it's safe and all the rest.
Sure.
Would you advise government to go into the market this time?
I would say it's a question of timing. I mean, at this moment, I would say no.
First 3 months, no.
First 3 months, no. I would say no. I would say
because some would say that let's do it quickly before the federal rate hike.
No, they don't. I mean, in the midst of all these turbulence, you know, when you are in a hole, you stop digging.
But isn't it good to do that before the federal rates goes up?
No, the way to do is to give yourself a temporary break, because everybody knows that policy, when you introduce a policy, there are lags. Okay, so, and it is easier to convince investors one-on-one basis than to do a universal roadshow. Okay, so I would advise that government at this stage of our economy would have to do more bilateral deals, striking more bilateral deals, okay, with counterpart funds outside.
I'm saying it delays too much sometimes.
No, it doesn't.
Compared to doing a Eurobond that is...
Yeah.
Because you've been on the market, they know you. You just do that, you get the money.
Yes, but in the situation in which you are, if you go, you pay a penalty for that. So it is time to now engage your friendly investors. You know, the economy is not bad. We are not in that bad. It's a perception, don't forget. So there are people who generally would sympathize with your cause. And,
I mean, you engage investors out there. I mean, the data that you have. I mean, what are those off-the-cuff conversations that these investors are having with you? That, I mean, are they telling that things are not that bad compared to other countries, our peers within our region?
Yeah, I mean, is the effort that is being made, like Professor Robert said, the expenditure cuts of 20% is a good signal. I mean, what we are trying to do to improve our revenue, it's a step in the right direction. In fact, the GRA had just said that they exceeded their revenue target for last year. Absolutely. I mean, that's fantastic. So you say these are positive signs that you can throw out there. And if you're having a one-on-one conversation with investors, you can show those figures and say, well, yes, this is what the rating says, but these are what we are doing. It's going to take time for some of the things that we have put in place, okay, some of the measures we have put in place to bear fruits. Okay, but in the interim, I mean, if you can bear with us, you know, you can have that one-on-one negotiation. It's a negotiation thing. I mean, and then when things get a bit quieter and then all the noises stop, and like I like to tell you that money doesn't like noise. Okay, so with all these...
When people talk about noise, my concern has always been that, having been outside on these road shows before, the data that these investors have about our economy, it is not what a Joy FM, a Joy Business, or a Daily Graphics is reporting. That often they say that, oh, you're even talking about the economy being downgraded, people will not come and invest. They have solid dossier.
They do.
This economy.
Absolutely, they do. They do.
So, I mean...
They do. I mean...
The so-called noise, they might not be moved by that, but what the analysts are advising them on the end-of-year depreciation of the city and whether government can raise X revenue, expenditure, and the corruption as well.
Yes, I mean, all those perception feeds into the rates that you get. Okay, now, and that's why I'm saying that going on a road show or going to try a Eurobond, I mean, you are going to get people and they will ask you all those difficult questions. Okay, now, but then once you are able to, you are putting the measures in place, and everybody knows that there are policy lags. So when you introduce a policy today, you don't see the effect immediately. It may take about 6 months, 9 months, or even 1 year to see the effect of those policies. I mean, you then have to convince investors that, look, okay, for this money that I'm borrowing, I'm using it for this specific sector, which I expect a better return. Okay, now, it's for those bilateral investors to now evaluate those options and say, okay, well, I mean, yeah, the government is right. If we invested this money in these areas, okay, these are the outcome of those investments. So those are like specific interventions that you are putting in place to beef up your productive sectors. I mean, also to convince investors that the money is going to be put to good use, okay? Corruption, perception, they're all perception, okay? And all those perception and things, it has to be fueled by facts to demonstrate that if you say, I mean, that you are using the money for the right cause, obviously, over the period, your statistics will show and it will expose you, okay? So now, you have to know that you are being watched. And every step that you make, I mean, monies that we put in SOEs that are not working, are not functioning, I mean, SOEs that are not collecting enough income, and we're always subsidizing them, all those freebies will have to stop. Okay, I mean, beyond 20%, you have to look at specific interventions within the economy and deal with it.
Mike, I asked you this question about investors are supposed to be long-termish.
Yes.
But there's this argument always been out there about the fundamentals of the economy and current happenings right now, and also the future outlook and all the rest. What is very critical about for some of these investors? Is it the foundation, the current situation, or the outlook where the economy is going? Because some have said that even within a pandemic, the economy grew by this distance. Obviously, something might be right about the economy, or the current challenge, or the fact that when I look forward to 2 years' time, things are going to be firm, and therefore I'll still hold my funds in company Ghana.
I would say it's a mix, okay? And don't forget that we also have political cycles. Yeah. I mean, and so investors look at all that. So it's a mix of all that is happening. And also, don't forget that this is a continuing government. So 4 years, you could have had a honeymoon period. But like I said, probably because of lax in policy, if first 2 years in government, okay, yeah, you are still tidying up. 3 years, then you go into an election. Election cycle. Okay, then after the election, you come back into mainstream again. It's a continuing government. So then you are being judged. So all the past, all the cleanup that you did and all that, people want to begin to see the results. If something was really happening, if you have actually planted well, if you have put money in the right places, we want to begin to see that. What are the developments? So don't be deceived that this is a short-term thing. Investors are looking with an eye and saying that, okay, yeah, when you came in, you said you were cleaning up, you cleaned up and all that. After the cleanup, what next? And where have the monies that has been borrowed in the past gone? Are we seeing any yields? Are we seeing any dividends? Should we have done better than where we are today? So all those things, and don't forget when we go on those road shows, they're all things that we say. Yeah. Okay, they challenge us. We challenge
the data.
Yes, the data, and then we come back and we say, oh no, that's not the case. We are able to prove. We are able to say this. We are able to say. It's like wait and see. Okay.
Let me bring in Professor Roberto. Say, as an economist, they always tell you to look into the crystal ball. Do you see us coming out of this challenge very soon, or it could take a while?
That's a difficult one. Truly, I'm going to look into a crystal ball. No, but I think that clearly, I mean, this ratings will hurt us. hopefully it will be only transitory and not even medium term, I'm hoping. But of course, you know that once the cost of funds externally are going up, what it will lead to is to turn to domestic funds to finance the whatever deficits we create at the end of the year. And of course, what that also means is that the cost of funds within the domestic economy will go up. If that goes up, depending on whether it impacts adversely on the supply bottlenecks, then that will mean that inflation will also go up. And so you'd have some adverse implications for the economy. However, if we are able to reprioritize properly, if we are able to harness the dividends, the growth dividends properly, so that, again, of course, note that once our growth is really good, that could translate quite positively to our revenues and therefore create more fiscal space for us. And so I think that, I think that the steps we are taking certainly is the right steps to take. As to whether we can stay on course, of course, then the whole political cycle then comes into play, like Mike is saying.
Your final words, as time is not our best friend right now. In a minute for you, what would be your advice if you chair an economic team that advises this government or the finance minister?
Stay on the current course.
Okay. Your advice in a minute. In a minute, what would be your advice to government and the finance minister? What to do now, or what should they be doing?
No, I think that the point I made with respect to expenditures are very important. We cannot say we are cutting 20% expenditure and not tackle the issue about prioritization and indeed improving efficiency of spending. We need to tackle those because that is the only way we can actually create some fiscal space. But while doing that, we also need to keep our eye on the revenue targets and indeed the revenue effort generally.
Thank you very much, Professor Roberto. I'll be coming to you for just a quick grab. And Mike, I mean, you're also an investment person as well. I mean, if an investor out there, a big multinational, wants to bring you like maybe $500 million or something, and asking you, Mike, when would this challenge be over? When would you advise me to place my funds? What are you going to tell this investor out there?
Well, that's a that's a very difficult one. Well, I would say, yeah, the economy, we still have very productive areas in the economy that is doing good. I mean, we need to look.
Or let me rephrase the question that you think that, I'll come back to that question, whether government is taking those critical steps that my funds will be safe if I bring in that $500 million.
No, I think, generally, based on what we are seeing, yeah, your funds should be safe. I'm not sure.
Is government taking those right measures to protect my investment as we speak?
Government, yeah, well, the 20% is, like I said, is a step in the right direction. Revenue enhancement is great. What we need to now do is to look at all those specific sectors that are sucking up part of our revenue. Okay, we have to make sure that the state entities are working. For instance, ECG is collecting what they have to collect. There are no freebies out there. Because, if we don't get enough, if we don't improve the collection that the ECG does, then we have to subsidize them. Because VRA depends on ECG, grid code depends on ECG. So there's all those linkages. So there are specific SOEs that we need to really keep an eye on the ball and make sure that they don't also drag or also suck part of the revenue that we are collecting. We need to do that. We need to look at those SOEs that are continually dependent on government and are not yielding any dividends. We need to look at those whether we can empower to actually generate more revenue and give us more foreign exchange. Okay, so all those things are there, and those are like critical, painful decisions that we have to go through. So yeah, it's good to say that we would reduce, we'll cut down expenditure by 20%, but there are specific interventions that we need to do, specific, very, very difficult decisions that we have to take. On some SOEs, like, divesting some SOEs that are not, and bringing in some investors who can help support it. You know, these are like some serious austerity measures that we need to take, very bold measures.
Mike, you've seen this thing before because you've been in this space for quite a long time, and even other countries as well. For you, the same question I asked Professor Roberto, say, when do you see this thing stabilizing in terms of what is happening right now? Because some are saying that, yes, of course, we may be in a crisis state.
Well, I would say we are not in a crisis state. As it were. We are
but when do you see things stabilize? So whatever challenges that we're going through right now?
Maybe a minimum of 6 months, I must say. Yeah, a minimum of 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah, a minimum of 6 months. Because then we would begin to see whether whatever we say we are implementing, we are really implementing them. The issues around the levy would have been resolved. And as it were, those are the things that will make investors comfortable.
Final words in 30 seconds.
Well, I think that we all have to get our loins and make sure that whatever space that we find ourselves as Ghanaians, we work hard to make sure that we improve this economy. For our politicians, there's harder work to be done. We have to dialogue and make sure that we get the economy running.
Dialogue, hard work. Mike Kobla is Chief Executive of Synergy Ghana Global Holdings. He's also an investment analyst and expert. Professor Roberto Say is an economist and associate professor at ISE and Dean of Graduate School, University of Ghana. And I am George Yafi, your host. Have a great day.